Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring you curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we look at the Loon Lake Festival that has celebrated Finnish culture for nearly 90 years. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Here to talk about the annual, now I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly, when I asked how to pronounce it, Terry told me to just give it my best shot. So this is my best shot. I apologize.
I just want to hear what your best guess is because, I'm curious if you could, maybe you can get it right naturally. I don't know. Maybe you have great Finnish pronunciation.
It's this double I that's throwing me off in here. Laskiainen? Oh, no, I have to screw up the middle. The middle is the one that's really screwing me up here. It's like Laskiainen. That I-A-I, that's... I don't know how to do that part.
Laskiainen. There's an I in there. That's the one that
Laskiainen.
like E-Y-E, Laskiainen.
That festival, you're talking about that festival, Laskiainen, which I'm maybe getting close-ish, is Terry Cato. Terry, welcome back. Now we're on episode 75 of the podcast.
My goodness. Why do I get the big monumental number episodes?
I don't know. Who set up the original budget?
But I'm okay with it. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having
me. So on the podcast, we were talking about just briefly before recording that we're no strangers to talking about Finnish heritage and anything Finnish-related culture in Northlandia. It's kind of hard not to talk about Northland history without the Finns being involved in some ways. But
listeners can't hear, but I'm nodding. Yes, very yes. Mm-hmm.
But what aspect of Finnish culture and history are we talking about here, and what prompted you to look into this particular sect of Finnish heritage in the Northland?
So what prompted me, I'm going to answer that first, because literally I had a different Northlandia story that I had it set up in my mind. It ended up falling through.
As they sometimes do.
Which happens. We'll get to it hopefully in the future. And I was talking on the phone with my sister, and I'm like, there's got to be something else that that's a very obvious thing that I'm missing. Is there something that happens in the Northland that you're just like, I want to know more about that. I don't know enough about it. And all credit to my sister Jackie. She went, what's that Finnish sliding thing that they do out in Palo? And I'm like, Laskiainen? Laska? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know very much about that. Okay. Fair enough. So I decided to reach out. I reached out to some of the organizers. I will admit, I got a little bit passed around to a couple of different people to be like, oh, you should talk to this person. Oh, no, I can't talk. You should talk to this person. No, you should really talk to. This is the person that you should talk to about this. And that
happens a lot.
And it's all right because the two people who I did talk to about it were very knowledgeable and they gave me a lot of information. So it was good. And so the aspect of Finnish culture that we are talking about right now is having to do with a celebration of Shrove or Shrovetide. So usually, traditionally, this is a celebration, Laskiainen is a celebration that would happen on the Tuesday before the start of Lent, or the couple of days, before the start of Lent. So that's the time that Monday, Tuesday, that's called Shrovetide. And so this was a tradition where you would go sliding on that Tuesday before Lent begins, and you would try and see how far onto the lake you and your family could slide. So you'd start on a hill, slide out onto a frozen lake, and the further that you slide that day, the more healthy and long your flax crops are going to grow, and then you can make longer and better clothes, and you're going to have a better year.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a weird but interesting tradition.
Mm-hmm. I imagine there's a whole history to how that came about. It almost sounds like, because it sounds like the combination of Catholicism or meets outside culture, paganism, what have you, because that idea doesn't sound like a Catholic idea, but it's being associated with, the Catholic Lent.
There's also a very, very heavily tied tradition of weaving and fiber arts tied to this celebration. So, okay, you've got the sledding out onto the lake, and then you've got it's also the time of the year that traditionally in Finnish culture, you would stop spinning then. You had to stop spinning any of your flax or your yarn or your wool by noon on Shrove Tuesday. And then you had to start then weaving instead. You're past the spinning stage, you're into the weaving stage. You're actually making the clothes and stuff because summer's just around the corner now. It's the beginning of that. But I will say, Laskiainen in Loon Lake and Palo is a month ahead of Shrove. So it's not observed. It's observed well before it, so it's not like after it, but it's been moved to like the first weekend in February, probably just because it makes more sense to have this kind of a wintry celebration then.
More encroached in winter.
Yeah, a little more encroached in winter, and I think it just works better timing-wise. Then the lake's more frozen solid. You don't have to worry about, like, is everything's going to melt. Even last year, it was 40 degrees out, and they were a little bit worried about that sliding hill. They're like, everything going to be okay? Are we gonna be okay? And
I'm surprised there was snow at all.
Yeah. They had been, like, building it up. So they start working at, like, the day that our story comes out, the 11th, January 11th for this story, is when they start building that hill. So, and even though the celebration is February 1st and 2nd, they've already started like working on it and like adding layers of like water and snow and making it really good.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, looking at just glancing at your article, that we've covered this before, because the lead photo is a file photo from Clint Austin, it looked like. So we have covered this event before.
Yeah, but I really wanted to dive more into like the history and the traditions.
Sure.
And also a little bit about like how it's, because it hasn't honestly changed that much over the years, but how is it like still celebrated? What aspects of it are still tied to the culture? What aspects of it are maybe newer? And also look at a lot at this one really cool experience that they had back in the day. We will get into that later.
Mm-hmm. So what else does sliding down a hill onto a frozen lake have to do with the Finnish tradition? We've already established there's a couple differences from the original. I always forgot how to say it. The
Laskiainen?
No, not that one. The time of the year that it's for, right before Lent. Shrovetide.
Yeah. So another aspect of the celebration that's really closely tied in with like Finnish culture, and the celebration of the Shrove celebration that they would have traditionally, is a lot of the food that's involved in the festival. They make a lot of different like Finnish inspired and Finnish foods. So for example, they have like Shrove is really like a big pancake. Like a lot of people call it Pancake Day. Like in the United Kingdom, it's generally referred to as Pancake Day. Like that's the day that people eat pancakes, because that's not something you're supposed to be eating during Lent, I suppose. I don't know. That's kind of the idea of it.
Okay.
And so then they have a big Finnish pancake feed. So they make Finnish oven pancakes, which are called korpsua. And so it's a weird kind of sounding name, but it's with they take and they put these pancake mix in the oven, and it becomes all nice, kind of puffy and interesting. Have you ever had one of those before?
Maybe. Not that I can think off the top of my head.
It's a little bit like, I know that there's the Dutch oven pancakes. It's kind of similar to that, a little bit different. Kind of same idea. Take your pancake mixture, put it in the oven instead of making it on top of the stove.
Okay.
And so they have a big crew of women who get together, mostly women. There may be some men involved. Great if there are, who gather together on that morning, and they bake like 400 plus oven pancakes for people. Yeah, a lot of people show up for that. It's a big thing. And then they have different toppings that you can put on them and whatnot. And then later in the day, they have a big like, I don't want to mispronounce this. Mohaka?
I have no idea.
Moyaka. It's moyaka.
We're trying here, folks.
They have a big moyaka feed, which is like a beef stew kind of mix, or beef and pork stew mix.
Okay.
So that's kind of a traditional lunch thing. And then for dinner, they have a pea soup dinner. And pea soup, that's a very traditional like Shrove dinner meal. That's according to one of the ladies that I spoke with, she's like, you'll find that in just about any kind of culture who celebrates Shrove. Like that's the traditional kind of a meal. Pancakes at some point, pea soup at some point, maybe kind of a stew at some point in the day.
Mm-hmm. So ideally, attendees shouldn't be going hungry at this event.
You should probably go with Not to mention, there's a lot of other like baked goods and other items that there are for sale, and that's definitely how the festival keeps going. It is kind of a fundraiser for the Loon Lake School that's there. It's a community building, and it also, that's kind of how they make any of their money, is through their baked goods and their foods and such. Because otherwise, sliding totally free. You can come as long as you have an acceptable sled that isn't either a saucer or doesn't have the really big runners on it. You can go down the hill and you can go slide for free.
Gotcha. And how long has the Loon Lake Festival been going on for exactly? I said around 90 years or near 90 years, but how long exactly? And what keeps people coming back?
So it's been going on steadily since 1937. That was the first recorded version. There are some theories that there were at least some celebrations that were a little bit smaller before that, but the first recorded one that they have on record 1937. And they wrote down exactly what they did during those celebrations, and that's what they've basically kind of stuck to it every year since then. Maybe a couple things have changed. They have a Laskiainen queen.
Okay.
So that they have different women who are young ladies who come forward, and they have, I think they have to sell tickets or fundraisers or such like that, and they get named the queen. And they've had a lot of those because they've had it ever since that very first year. So that's quite a few. And then they do all kinds of other events and things that are happening around it. There's like some basketball tournaments. There's a basketball tournament that is specifically for people who are over 40. So if you're over 40 and you really like to play basketball, there's a spot for you. They have like some sleigh rides. They have some dog sled rides that are happening and all kinds of other kind of good wintry, outdoorsy, indoorsy kind of stuff happening. There's some entertainment that's happening throughout the day. They have different entertainers who are coming in and performing. And yeah, it's a pretty big, they get a lot of attendance.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever attended yourself?
Admittedly, no.
That's surprising.
I know. I was a little bit surprised too, because I was like, why have I never, just life,
It
busyness.
sounds fun.
I don't know. It does sound very fun. I don't know. Blame my parents. I don't know. They don't listen to the podcast. It's fine.
No, that's fine. I'm sure there's lots of things in Duluth area that I've never been to, even though I've grown up here. There's just,
There's things that you hear about and you go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, I'll definitely go next year. And then next year comes and it's like maybe 2 degrees outside and you're like, maybe not. Maybe I won't do that. It's okay. That they said they get a good turnout, no matter if it's like 40 degrees or if it's like negative 40, that people tend to still show up.
Mm-hmm.
They still want to go sliding. They still want to do all the things.
So I'm looking at my notes here to head a little bit, and I'm reading something about how it ended up being included in the 1980 Smithsonian American Folklife Festival.
Yeah. So one of the ladies that I spoke to, she's actually kind of responsible in a roundabout way for making that happen. So she's been a volunteer with the festival for years and years and years, right? And she was also working for the Iron Range Historical Society at the time. And she was asked to accompany this guy. His name was Thomas Venom. He was a ethnomusicologist for the Smithsonian. And he was going around and he was giving talks, and he gave one at the time, Masabi College. And he got there and realized that he did not have his materials to do the talk. So he's like, I don't have anything that I need to present. And so she literally stepped up and was like, well, you could talk about Laskiainen. And he goes, what is that? So she tells him about it. And he goes, okay, tell me more. And I don't know what exactly happened on the night of the presentation. I think eventually maybe they'd worked around and found a way for him to present anyway. But importantly, that got the ball rolling, and he went back to the Smithsonian and went, okay, I've heard about this festival in northern Minnesota. We got to have this represented at our folk, festival that we have. And so they sent out somebody the next year to go and document it. They got a lot of video footage and photos and decided what could we bring? What could we, take with us? And so they decided to I am not going to attempt to pronounce the Finnish name for what this is that they decided to bring with. But I am going to call it just what it informally is. It's called a whip sled. So out on the lake, they have this hand-powered sled that runs on tracks on the ice.
Okay.
So it kind of runs in a circle. So there's one person pushing and one, usually a kid in the sled, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a word for it, but I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I don't want to get it wrong.
You make me pronounce these on my best attempts.
It's like a vipu kelka. I don't want to get That's my best.
We apologize to our Finnish listeners that know how to pronounce these things.
I can count up to 7 in Finnish, and that's as far as I ever got. So sorry. That's anyway. Back to this. So they decided to create. So instead of doing that, obviously the festival was held, unfortunately, in the summer. So they couldn't bring a hill, and they couldn't do any of the sledding sort of things. But what they did is they made a version of that sled. That whip sled that ran on wheels, and they made a little track for it, and they brought that out, and then so there was kids there in Washington D.C. Pushing each other on this little sled on a track in a circle, and it was it looked like they had a pretty good time. They went there and they brought some Finnish performer, some of the people who performed at the festival in the past, all kinds of things, and they had kind of a cultural exchange because they were the only ones in the festival. There were other cultures and such that were around them, and they kind of had a nice little cultural exchange moment, and they got included in the program, and it's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. One of those interesting opportunities to have
get some
our
recognition.
Northlandian culture kind of spread out to or be observed through the rest of the country or some fashion outside of our area.
Yeah. And that's kind of how it went.
Gotcha. And as we're recording this year's event is happening in a few weeks. Was it the weekend of February 1st, 2nd?
Yes.
Gotcha. What's happening for Laskiainen? Did I say that right? Or close?
Pretty good.
All right. I'll take it. This year.
Same sort of things that happen at Laskiainen every year. So they have all the sledding hills. They're going to have them. At least that's the plan. I will say it is a little bit colder up there than it is down here. And as it has also been, they've had a little more snow than us.
Okay, we're in a bit of a snow deficit in Duluth right now.
I know.
But they're not at the bottom of the hill, so.
Well, and also they're going to start like building it up, and hopefully they should have enough to build up on. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. And then they're going to have all the other bits and pieces that make the festival what it is. Nothing particularly new. You can also go through, they have a small museum at the Loon Lake Community Center, so you can go through and you can look at other past celebrations of Laskiainen. You could go and look and be like, oh, that's what that looks like. That's what that was like. You can see some of the really cool photos from like the 1980 festival that they went to. Yeah, it should be a fairly traditional Laskiainen, provided everything goes as planned.
Yeah, always hard to gauge with the weather, you know?
Especially when you're talking about something that's happening like nearly a month in advance. You're like...
That's true.
Hopefully everything is fine.
Yeah. We've already had many events get adjusted here and there because of the weather, you know, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. All right, Terry, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for joining us and for bringing more Finnish culture and heritage to the podcast, which I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities in the future.
Possibly.
We keep finding more. It's hard to not bring up the Finnish history and heritage in the area when we're talking about the Northland.
It's a thing that happens.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us in this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, visit DuluthNewsTribune.com/topics/Northlandia. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber to Duluth News Tribune at DuluthNewsTribune.com/subscribe. Join us again next time and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss around the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.